And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Flowers of Esthelm. This is the third book in the Wandering Inn series by pirateaba. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just now. So this is a 5 out of 5. Once again, this is 3 books in a row from the Wandering Inn. The first 3 books I'm giving 5 out of 5s. And I am in love with everything that I just read. I'm so shocked that I love this book as much as I do. Not so much this book, but this series. It doesn't seem like this is a series for me. I went into this thinking this is going to be childish. This is nothing about the sort of literature that I like. I like this more dark, kind of more deep, philosophical, high epic fantasy. And I'm reading more of like this kind of video gamey, kind of casual web serial, and it is so good. It's one of my favorite series that I've ever read, and I'm pretty confident that the more I read into this, the more I'm going to feel this way until it becomes one of my all-time favorite series. I can't get over how good this is. I can't get over that this series has not blown up in the wider fantasy community yet. I know that it's huge when it comes into the web serial game, but that's a very small subset of fantasy book readers, and this is just so awesome. I want to give you a little bit of a preview about what this series is all about, though, because it's a little more complicated than I think most series for the background of this. So this is a web serial. This means that the author puts this out for free on a regular basis. This is the longest fantasy series of all time by a rather large margin. Not so much because it's been out for a really long time, which I think it has, but by the prolific nature that this author, pirateaba, releases these stories. It is legitimately crazy how quickly this author puts out new episodes into this series at the rate of about 60,000 words per week. Now, you might not understand what words mean in the greater context, but what that means is the average book is about 100,000 words. So this author's putting 6/10 of a book out every single week. It makes people like George R. R. Martin probably, literally put into the dust. It's insane what goes into doing this, literally on a weekly basis, too. It's not like, oh, there's going to be some weeks where we don't do it. We're going to hit some, not miss some. It's every single week, and I don't know that they've ever missed one. It's crazy. Now, you're coming into the game very late, and so these are all for free online. And online, they're separated into huge volumes. And you could think of a volume as kind of a major overarching story arc that maybe doesn't conclude at the end of it, but it's got that kind of beginning, middle, and end that a traditional story would. Now, they're enormous. Some of the arcs are probably 10 plus books of what we would consider good-sized fantasy books. But the arcs here, when they translated them into book format, and they're slowly getting transferred over to ebook format. That's what I'm reading on. I read on an ebook, and I think there's 7 of the books that are out so far, and that's a small portion of the amount of work that's been put into this. If all of them were books today, it would probably be about 40 to 50 books worth. But I think like 1, 2, maybe 3 get released a year. And so I'm reading the third. There's 7. I'm not going to end up reading the web version. I'm just going to stick to the books. So when I catch up, I'll probably catch up around book 8, and then I'll just read them as they come out. Because I don't want to get overwhelmed about this whole let's catch up. That would be overwhelming on how much this is. This is probably multiple Wheel of Time's length, more than 2, I think, which is crazy. So let me go into the various aspects of this book and talk about the different things that I liked about it and some of the things that I didn't like about it. And so let's start with the story. Now, we're 3 books in. The first book was about 1,000 pages. The second book was about 2,000 pages. This book's another 1,000 pages. So we're now 4,000 pages in. And so I can't talk about the story in too much detail without ruining some major events that I don't want to ruin for you on this spoiler-free review. But I will say generally there's a few things I want to talk about. One is this story is kind of a lot of little stories weaved into each other. And now this is not anywhere close to what Malazan is, but it kind of reminds me of Malazan in a big way, because Malazan is a bunch of little stories that all weave together, and that's what's happening here. There is kind of an overarching story, I think, but it's really all about all these little stories. And they're marching towards things, but they're not marching towards this one thing. They're all marching, and they're kind of diverging and coming together and going in this way, and some characters are going here to solve this thing, and some are going over here. It's a really cool storytelling device that I am all about. I love the normal, let's go from point A to point B, but I also really, really enjoy the freshness that this one gives. And so there's a ton of different stories going on here. But let me point out a few that I don't think will spoil anything. One is, this story brings up in the first pages of this book a brand new character, and I love that. And before I jump into that, let me just quickly refresh you on what the overarching story here is. It's about a group of kids, older teens, I think, that end up getting transported to this fantasy world from our world. And it's like Dungeons and Dragons, where characters literally level up. You could be doing, the main character, for instance, on the first chapter, becomes an innkeeper. They find this abandoned inn, and they decide to make the best of it. And when she goes to sleep that night, she turns into the innkeeper class. And she gets different skills every time she levels up that class. Think of an RPG video game in literary format, and I think it's called Lit RPG is the type of book this is. I haven't read any before, but I love the aspect of that. It's addicting to see these different skills get translated into these characters, trying to figure out what they do. The characters themselves are trying to figure out what they do, and seeing how they play out, it really adds this fresh take to it that I enjoy. So a brand new character shows up at the beginning of this book, and this boy who gets transported and doesn't know any of the other characters. He's in a different part of the world. Actually, I think he's on the same continent, but we haven't investigated that part yet. And he decides that he wants to become an emperor. And that's not a class that anybody else has. In his journey, he's blind. And so seeing this blind, I've never read a blind POV before. It's really interesting. And this boy's journey to become an emperor. It's really fun. As I started reading it, I kept thinking like, oh, I want to go back to the main story. I want to see what's going on with Aaron and Ryoka. I don't care about this. But by the end of his little arc, I was like, I don't want to see what's going on with anybody else. I want to figure out what's going on with this dude. So it's really fun. I love that aspect. In fact, I kept thinking that throughout this book. Every time they go to this book was really about, let's telling new stories. Let's not go down the path of the Aaron Ryoka plots, although it does touch on those. It's not the main part about what this book is. This book takes new characters or existing characters that we get a bigger focus on, and I loved it. By the end of this book, I was like, I don't even want to know what's going on with Aaron Ryoka anymore. Give me these other characters. I want to figure out what's going on with them. That's a sign of a really engaging book, and yeah, it really had me gripped. So another storyline is, I can't say too much here, but a skeleton who has become sentient. He can think for himself, act by himself, and he wants to be his own person. And it's a lot more in depth than that. I would love to talk spoilers with you. Come to the Discord, links down below. I'd love to talk to you about it because there's a lot I can say that I can't say here, but I love this character's journey. I thought I'd hate the journey, but I loved it. And I love getting my expectations subverted in that positive way, which happened here. There was also a very classic dungeon quest that was unique, fun, gripping, dark, engaging. I loved everything about it. There was a really fun storyline that did not just involve this character, it involved a lot of characters that had this convergence of events comes together. Again, think Blazen, where all the characters come together for this epic conclusion of these story arcs. But this girl who becomes a zombie, she's a regular person who has had some horrible events happen to her. And within the first couple of pages of reading about her, she is forced to cannibalize another human because she's going to die. And by doing that, she gets this undead class. And to see this girl's journey where she goes down to slowly become like a zombie is really engaging and a crazy storytelling that I've never read about before. And it was just fun. And then another big story plot here was this Antinium, think a big ant, bigger than a human, who has become religious, and how that religion plays out with the rest of his hive. All of a sudden, this new responsibilities that this new religious leader has for a group that doesn't previously have religion is very fun to read about. A lot of fantasy books play with the religious concept, and I'm not going to claim that this is the best I've ever read, but it was very engaging, and I loved everything about it. Now let's go to the world building. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but it's at 5 out of 5. I absolutely adore the world here, and I talk about this a lot, but the hallmark of a good world building to me is two major things. One is, will I keep thinking about it for a really long time and remember a lot of things about it? Will it get stuck in that brain of mine and just kind of leave me in fascination? And check, it absolutely did that. Now the next part is it a world that is bigger than the events that are happening in that book? Think something like a Wheel of Time, where you had this world, all these major things are happening, but you also have other continents that aren't ever traveled to that make the world feel bigger and more real. And that, another check, that's happening here. Now, we are getting to expand into that world more and investigating and finding out more about the world, but it's a world full of magic, full of wonder, and it's an all-time great world, and I love it. Now let's go to the fantasy elements. Again, 5 out of 5. I loved them. I love this RPG aspect of this. Now, maybe I'm a little biased. I'm a big video game fan. I make no bones about it. I play a lot of video games, not as much as I used to, with doing a lot of reading, being a dad, but I still play every night. I love video games, and I love RPGs. And I love this aspect of this leveling up system. These characters getting these different classes, how as a reader you're going along with these characters, they'll find out, oh, I got some random word skill. I don't know what that skill is. They don't know what that skill is, but we see it manifest itself later on in the story, and it's so fun with kind of like that mystery of what are these skills, what do they do, what happens when you get up to these higher levels. It's awesome. I love so much about it, and that's just the leveling system. I also love the inventiveness of the different creatures and characters. There's so many different classes of people, different parts of this world with different people that do different things. You have these huge ants, you have the classic goblins, you have huge trolls, you have everything that would make things fun. The huge cave spiders, these huge like rock crabs, like a million different things like that. I would never be able to, I could spend this entire video just listing off the different types of creatures and stuff there are, and I wouldn't get through it all in the amount of time that I've talked in this video so far. It's that deep and fun. Now the characters. Now the characters is something that I have criticized a little bit in the past, and I think I gave a 3, maybe 4 out of 5 for these in the past. Now I'm giving it a 5. I love these characters. I think spending less time with the main two characters has made me appreciate them more. And I love the side characters even more than I have before. I've said before that I thought the main characters were a little weaker. I thought the side characters were great. So to get this greater focus on these side characters did everything in a positive way towards making this story more enjoyable for me and making these characters more compelling. I want more of this. I could read so many of these books, and I don't even have to touch on the characters that I've read. Throw new ones out there. Give me a book with all brand new characters. I'm there for it. I think this writer is amazing in the way that they can make me so interested in these brand new characters. I can't wait to read more of it. Then I'm going to go to the writing quality, and this is the only area I'm not going to give a perfect score. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 before. It is getting better. It's noticeably better. I think the writer's getting more confidence as they go along. I don't think this writer wrote anything before The Wandering Inn. Certainly not to the level that this is in terms of being popular. I'm sure everybody did some writing, but certainly no published works. But it's very clear that the quality is improving, not just in the prose, but the way that the story is coming together. It's more deep. It has these little writing quirks that I think are really interesting. The way that they're bringing characters together and splitting them up, everything about it is working a lot better. And I've heard this too. I've heard that it continues to get better even after this point. I'm not at a plateau yet. I don't know if it plateaus, but it is getting better and better, and I have every confidence that the next book's going to even be better than this one in a writing quality. So without going too much longer, let's just go to the enjoyability. Obviously, it's a 5 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed my time. I rocketed through this book in a rather short amount of time. I think I read like 120-ish pages a day, which is pretty high for me. And yeah, I cannot recommend this book enough. If you like RPG video games, if you like video games at all, if you like a more cozy fantasy book with more serious elements mixed in, read this book. If you like an engaging world, read this book. There are so many reasons to read this book, and maybe more than any of them. This is free. Just go to thewanderingin.com, check it out. You don't even have to buy the books. Just read a little bit to see if you're into it. But I bet you're going to get hooked within the first 50 or so pages. Once the real hook starts getting in there and you start realizing what this is all about, it's hard to put down. Now, I also suggest, real quick before we wrap up, that if you can do it, read this on your computer. It's better than the ebook format. Now, I'm reading ebook because I like to travel around, and I'm kind of OCD. I like to have this book in my hands and put all my books on it. But when you read it on the computer, you get this colorized text when certain events happen that make things more impactful, more special text with certain characters that talk. You can kind of hover your mouse over certain things and it'll give you a little context on some things. And from everything that I've read, it's a better experience. So check it out. It's free. I hope you enjoy it. And as always, happy reading to you.